Good evening and welcome. I'm Martha Bergmark. I'm a founder of the Mississippi Center for Justice, and I've attended every one of our 17 annual Mississippi on the Potomac receptions. I love this chance to share MCJ's story with our DC friends and now with friends across the country. 17 years ago, the national legal groups had long since pulled up stakes from their vital outposts in Jackson, and Mississippi was left without a homegrown legal arm to address the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. I took that personally. Growing up in Jackson, my childhood heroes included the 8 black classmates who desegregated my school, Murrah High School. I could not imagine having their sheer courage. This was barely a year after the murders and church bombings of Freedom Summer, and it was just 2 years after Medgar Evers was gunned down in his driveway just a few miles from my home. The courage of the Murrah 8, the justness of their cause, their persistence in the face of cruelty and malice inspire me to this day. Indeed, I credit their example with setting me on my life course. So MCJ was not optional, it had to happen. And in 2003, it did. In 2020, we've come to another moment that must happen. I believe this can be a turning point in history, but only if we work to make it so, especially in Mississippi. The Murrah 8 of this new generation must lead. That leader at Mississippi Center for Justice is Vangela M. Wade, native Mississippian, accomplished lawyer, advocate for justice in the most fierce and big-hearted way. She was on our board, then served as our board chair, and now she is our president and CEO. It is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce to you Vangela M. Wade. Over to you, Vangela.
Thank you so much, Martha. Thank you for your leadership and vision for MCJ. I am grateful to serve as the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Justice. When I think of the long line of leaders in Mississippi, but particularly the women before me, like Martha Bergmark and so many women of color that stood courageously against formidable odds in Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hamer, Victoria Gray, Marion Wright Edelman, Annie Devine, Unita Blackwell, Constance Slaughter Harvey, and so many others. I am humbled and draw strength from them, knowing that I carry on a crucial and important battle. Today is Juneteenth, on which many celebrate and mark the day when enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, were read the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, a holiday itself built on cruelty, for it took 2 full years to deliver the news of freedom to these enslaved Texans. There are various stories as to why that happened, one of which is that the Union command gave the plantation owners time to bring in the crops. Free labor, yet again. We selected Juneteenth as the date of our event precisely because we pay tribute to past generations fighting for freedom and to our current generation in the midst of struggle against racial oppression and inequality. This is how we believe Juneteenth should be celebrated, remembered by all of us. I humbly invoke the names of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, and the memory of countless others, honoring the legacy of perseverance, struggle, survival, and yes, even prosperity, in spite of decades of systemic discrimination and injustice, often under the color of law, using it as a powerful prop in the carnival of white supremacy. The fight continues on so many fronts in Mississippi, yet we keep fighting to remove the veil and the power supporting design systems of oppression, systemic poverty, deplorable prison conditions, and too many government policies aligned against the most vulnerable, all under the billowing Confederate flag, Mississippi Stars and Bars, America's most embattled emblem. COVID-19 has already begun a new cycle of legal needs, evictions, public benefits, and access to health care. The pandemic affects all of us, of course, but the devastation is magnified for the poor and people of color, often the lowest paid workers who lack health benefits and who are our essential frontline workers. At 38% of our state's population, African Americans constitute nearly 50% of the state's known COVID-19 cases, and just as many deaths due to health disparities. Without change, this disease will cripple poor and Black communities across Mississippi. These statistics on COVID-19 are terrifying, but not surprising. Decades of systemic and structural discrimination have blocked African Americans from full access to health care, employment, education, housing, food security, and more. And the state's leadership refusing to expand Medicaid to ensure health care for the state's most vulnerable will make pulling oneself up by their own bootstraps unlikely, as the straps are far too tattered to withstand the strain of decades of racial, economic, and social injustice. When I accepted the position of President CEO of Mississippi Center for Justice on January 15th, I said that I saw my leadership as an opportunity to do extraordinary work in my home state. What's extraordinary is the way this homegrown team of lawyers and advocates band together, informed completely by the people we serve, to fight the injustices, the disparities. At MCJ, we fight, and we fight hard because we have to. This evening, you will hear about our successful fight to free an immigrant who was detained during the notorious poultry plant ICE raids on August 7th, 2019, while working to provide for his family. You will hear about our fight to address prison conditions during the COVID-19 crisis, and we will take a moment to reflect on the murder of Emmett Till, a young Black boy, a child, who in 1955 was killed in Mississippi by racist white men who went unpunished. You will hear about the forever fight for justice in the recognition of our esteemed board member and friend, Donald B. Verrilli, Jr. Finally, true to our Mississippi culture, and we often rely on art to tell our stories, we will experience the musical stylings of bluesman Mr. Vasti Jackson, 2016 Grammy nominee, 2017 Mississippi Governor's Art Award recipient, and a son of Mississippi. So thank you for joining us this evening. We began with a recognition of the child of the Civil Rights Movement, the fight to preserve the legacy of Emmett Till's death and his life.
In 1955, Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African-American youth from Chicago, was brutally murdered by white men for flirting with a white woman at a grocery store in Money, Mississippi. Emmett's mother, Mamie, demanded that he be returned to Chicago and held an open casket funeral for her son to show the media and the world the brutality of his death. Her decision was instrumental in sparking the outrage that fueled the modern civil rights movement. Sites connected to the Emmett Till tragedy, including Bryant's Grocery, where Till encountered 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant, the home from which Till was kidnapped, and the Mississippi courthouse where Till's murderers were tried and acquitted, as well as the Roberts Temple Church in Chicago, are important to those who wish to honor Till's legacy. However, some key sites have fallen into disrepair and are in danger of being forever lost to history. Signs commemorating these locations often are vandalized. With leadership from Pro Bono Council and the Emmett Till Interpretive Center in Sumner, Mississippi, MCJ has moved efforts forward to have several sites placed under the umbrella of the National Park Service. For years, Congressman Benny Thompson urged Congress to extend federal historic protection to this critical cluster of sites, but it took more to move this worthy project forward.
I grew up in Mississippi. I graduated in the first desegregated class in my high school. This was the civil rights movement that was part of my growing up experience. And so for me, this project represented a love of my state of Mississippi, but a recognition of so many injustices that occurred and crimes that were committed. And I approached this project as a reconciliation project, reconciliation for me and all Mississippians. I approached Senator Thad Cochran. We pulled together legislation and working with the Mississippi Center for Justice and the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. We identified 5 properties that were considered most important in the state, but also represented the full state to be part of a study, a feasibility study by the National Park Service. This feasibility study bill was passed in an omnibus bill that actually got pushed into the spring of 2017. My hope is that this is going to be a learning experience for multiple generations from all over the country, people who will come and understand what took place here, what spurred the civil rights movement in the country, particularly as we're experiencing so much in the country right now. But it began there, right there.
When we were able to actually bring the team that was advocating for the protection of these sites to Washington, D.C., both Reverend Parker and Dr. Parker could tell the story of Emmett, and Reverend Parker in particular, given that he was actually an eyewitness to what happened to Emmett, his ability to kind of communicate what Emmett's life meant to him, what Emmett's death meant to him, what these sites mean to him, and how the story of racism in America could be told through protecting those sites. You could see the people in Washington, D.C. just immediately understand and gravitate towards kind of what we were advocating for, which was increased protection of these sites. And I remember in our first conversation about the Chicago sites, I realized how amazing it could be if you could protect both the Chicago sites and the Mississippi sites, and you could talk about Emmett's journey from Chicago to Mississippi with visitors who were in both places, and learning about Emmett, knowing his experience, knowing who he was, knowing his family. You do kind of get especially attached. And I think it's critically important in a time like today that we take time and effort and resources towards telling these tragic stories so that we can learn from them and not repeat them.
My name is Wheeler Parker. I am the cousin of Emmett Till. We traveled together in August of 1955 to visit relatives in Mississippi. I was with him the last days of his life, from the incident at the Bryant grocery store until he was kidnapped in the middle of the night and taken away. The brutal murder of Emmett Till showed us what life was like in the Jim Crow system in Mississippi. And the acquittal of the murderers let the world know that there was no justice in the court system in Mississippi. We thank Mississippi Center for Justice for what you do and what you're doing to preserve this vital part of history, and trust that it will be used in many generations to come as a learning history for the people of this country.
I'm Marvell McCain Parker, and we would like to thank the law firm of Latham and Watkins, Mannett Phillips, Phelps, and the Mississippi Center for Justice for their commitment to the preservation of the memory of Emmett Till in the state of Mississippi, the Emmett Till Interpretive Center, and the Tallahatchie County Courthouse. And on behalf of the Mamie Till Moberly estate survivors, Crosby Smith, who is the executor of the estate, Ollie Gordon, mother of the late Erica Gordon Taylor, the pastor, Reverend Wardlaw, and members of the Roberts Temple Church, we want to thank you for your support and willingness to assist the Illinois sites in their quest to receive national landmark status for the Roberts Temple Church and listing on the National Register for Historic Places. We thank you.
June Langston DeHart, you are a brilliant problem solver, and we thank you and Mannett, Phelps, and Phillips for all you did to enable these sites in Mississippi to be evaluated for the National Park System. Nikki Buffa, your team at Latham and Watkins helped to put this project on the inside track with federal agency officials. And then you extended your support to Chicago's Roberts Temple Church, where Mamie Till Mobley showed the world a bitter and necessary truth. We can't place a value on your dedication to these efforts. We know it far exceeds the more than $500,000 in donated services. We thank you for your promise to see this through to the end. And now, to kick it way up for us, please welcome the Grammy-nominated, fiery blues guitarist, Mr. Vasti Jackson.
Hello everybody, Vasti Jackson here, and I'm so happy to be with you for 2020's Mississippi on the Potomac. Yes, with the Mississippi Center for Justice. You know, I really love this organization, and I've been affiliated with them for many years. Matter of fact, I wrote a song about it. Would y'all like to hear it? I can't hear you. Would you all like to hear the song I wrote for the Mississippi Center for Justice? Would you like to hear this song I wrote for the Mississippi Center for Justice? Well, I'm going to play it for you. We're making Mississippi a better place for people to live, work, and play. We're the Mississippi Center for Justice. We are the MCJ. Yeah, we fight for the right of every man, woman, boy, and girl. We're here to protect, we're here to serve. We're the Mississippi Center for Justice. We are the MCJ. Now when your legal rights have been stepped on, give us a call, just pick up the phone. We'll be right there, we'll take a stand, be a shoulder to lean on, and a strong hand. Now when your road gets dark and you can't find your way, now who you gonna call? The MCJ. The Mississippi Center for Justice. The Mississippi Center for Justice. We're the Mississippi Center for Justice. We are the MCJ. Let me say that again, y'all. We are the Mississippi Center for Justice. The Mississippi Center for Justice. We're the Mississippi Center for Justice. We are the MCJ. Yeah.
There's nothing like the blues of Mississippi. The music, the stories, the emotions, the struggles. It moves you deep down in your soul. Our clients at MCJ tell their own stories. As lawyers and advocates, we fight when they can't. Here are MCJ attorney Max Myers and our client, Mr. Tony Augustine.
So, cuando nos llevaron, yo supe que se llevaron a mi esposa también, quien es Hilda, y pues el miedo en mí era inmenso porque no sabíamos, o yo no sabía quién iba a recoger a mi niña, que ella estaba en la escuela, y yo era el que la recogía después del trabajo.
Tony and nearly 700 other people were taken by bus to a National Guard airplane hangar in Mississippi's August heat. They were fingerprinted, photographed, interrogated, and eventually about half were released with court summons. The other half, like Tony, were sent to detention centers converted from Mississippi and Louisiana prisons.
So, cuando llegamos a nosotros a la detención, todos queríamos una llamada por teléfono para hablar con nuestros familiares, pero estando ahí con tantas personas, ellos decían nada más que no podían hacer nada por nosotros hasta que terminaran de procesarnos. Y tardamos como más o menos una semana y media para poder comunicarnos con las familias. Y yo tardé dos semanas para poder comunicarme con Hilda para decirle dónde estaba, porque no podíamos hablar por teléfono por una semana y media.
Together with our partner organizations, the Mississippi Center for Justice organized representation for bond hearings and put together a fund that paid the bonds for over 90 individuals liberated from ICE custody. Outside detention, MCJ provided over 100 individuals with no-cost, full-scope representation in their immigration cases and conducted dozens of legal clinics across the state. Still, scores of folks, hundreds of our neighbors, remained incarcerated for months. Tony, who was among the several dozen confined in Richwood Detention Center, were outright denied bond hearings and sat incarcerated through the fall, winter, and into the spring. Then things got worse with the arrival of a global pandemic. Recognizing the growing danger, Tony took to action.
Y la segunda vez, cuando hicimos huelga, que fue cuando nosotros nos enteramos de que las detenciones estaba pegando el virus del COVID-19 y estábamos tratando de que nos liberaran. Por eso nada más duramos 2 días en huelga, porque llegaron los guardias solamente y nos dijeron que no íbamos a ganar nada con eso, que no nos iban a liberar y que si seguíamos nos iban a castigar. Por eso paramos la huelga.
Guards turned off TVs, silenced outside information, and told inmates the threat was just fake news. But justice can sprout through the cracks of oppression.
Pues así es esta historia, como empezó, hasta que un día cambió, porque de repente también, no sé cómo fueron, que llegaron todas las organizaciones que empezaron a ayudar gratuitamente a la gente, y todo se empezó a mover. Muchos empezaron a tener esperanzas de que iban a salir, y muchos también ya nomás estaban esperando a que los llevaran para su lugar de origen. Y gracias a esas organizaciones como la que tienen ustedes allí, y ese equipo que está muy fuerte armado, y que tengo un equipo muy grandioso que logró sacarme de esa cárcel. Pues, por un lado, por la ayuda de ellos, estoy yo libre. Y quisiera agradecerle a esas organizaciones, a nombre de todas las personas que lograron sacar. Y así como decíamos, de que gracias a todas las organizaciones ahora estoy afuera. Una de las cosas que pusieron o ellos pudieron hacer para sacarme fue porque estaba de la presión alta, y decían que era un riesgo muy tenía mucho riesgo con la enfermedad que ya tenía, con este nuevo virus que estaba pegando, el coronavirus.
Mr. Augustine inspires me. He and his family are who we fight for, and we do it with your resources. This evening, our goal is $400,000 to continue the work on behalf of our state's most vulnerable. You all recognize the need, and we know the efficiency of supporting the Mississippi Center for Justice. We need your partnership now more than ever. We're asking you to stretch your capacity and help us to continue breaking the chains of injustice. Go to MississippiCenterForJustice.org to make your donation now. Even without the burden of COVID-19, over half of Mississippi's households are unable to make ends meet with even the slightest of interruption of income. For Black households, it's over 73%. Before the pandemic, over 39% of Mississippians had a debt in collection. This is a perfect storm for predatory lenders, already 3 to 4 deep on most streets in poor neighborhoods across this state.
Mississippi ranks 51st on the prosperity of its residents. Mississippi also ranks 51st in households with savings accounts, 51st in being behind on bills, 51st in being severely delinquent borrowers, and 51st in having saved for emergencies. These rankings show how dire the circumstances were in Mississippi for consumers prior to the pandemic. The loss of jobs and the lack of income resulting from the pandemic brought to light how many Mississippians are just one paycheck away from economic instability. Thousands of Mississippians now rely on unemployment compensation to survive. While the CARES Act provided some help through stimulus payments to individuals as a form of relief, the act did not provide protection from the garnishment of those payments, and neither did the state of Mississippi. Debt collectors garnished these payments before many of those most in need could put the money toward the type of relief the stimulus payment was designed for, such as keeping a roof over their heads, or keeping the lights on, or putting food on the table for the family. Our Consumer Protection Division has been responsive to calls from concerned consumers about garnishments, debt collections, and fraud. We are providing clients with knowledge and guidance to successfully defend against garnishments and debt collection matters, including in the Mississippi Delta, where the median household income in some Delta towns is estimated at just over $13,000, which is less than a quarter of the $54,000 national average. In these same Delta communities and across the state of Mississippi, we find the proliferation of predatory lenders, like car title loan companies and payday lenders, who target minority and marginalized communities that lack mainstream financial institutions. These predatory lenders charge outrageous fees and interest, resulting in never-ending cycles of debt and leading to generational poverty. To combat these predators, we have established partnerships with banks throughout the state to help provide free checking and savings accounts, to make loans with reasonable terms, and to provide financial literacy to those without it. Economically in Mississippi, we were already at a crisis level prior to the pandemic. We ranked 51st on the prosperity of our residents compared to the rest of the country. We do not plan on remaining ranked 51st any longer. Our fight has always been an uphill battle, but we remain steadfast in our determination to make a positive impact on Mississippi consumers, and through our work and with your support, we are making this happen. Thank you.
A new horror, adding fuel to the flame, is the incidence of COVID in our prisons. As if overcrowding, underfunding, and abuse wasn't enough, families of prisoners are confronted with fear of contagion. Next, meet MCJ attorney Paloma Wu, Deputy Director of our Impact Litigation, and Christy Barone, a mother balancing advocacy for her incarcerated son with her role as a healthcare worker during this COVID-19 crisis.
I watch the news on COVID-19 in my scrubs every morning and tell my husband goodbye as I leave to help combat the most critical pandemic in the last 100 years. But even as I worry about patients, co-workers, and the risk of bringing this illness home to people that I love, my heart is always with my son, who is incarcerated in one of the prisons covered by the Mississippi Center for Justice lawsuit. Having a loved one locked behind those bars is far too common these days. A recent university study shows that a staggering 45% of Americans have had an immediate family member incarcerated, and Mississippi has one of the highest incarceration rates in the nation. But I'm reminded every day through my work just how far short Mississippi prisons are falling in basic protections for inmates like my son. I talk to my son on the phone, since in-person visits are not allowed right now, and what I hear is so at odds from what I know to be safe and healthy. People incarcerated spend most of their days grouped closely together, so it's impossible to maintain social distancing. They don't have basic things like masks, soap, sanitizer, and often not even clean, uncontaminated water. They have no supplies to clean and disinfect their living quarters. Seeing a doctor or nurse is extremely difficult, and testing is not routinely available. Our state leaders have spent years being tough on crime and harsh on budgets. Policies that sound good, but in fact left our prisons overcrowded, underfunded, and in desperate shape. And it's my hope that this lawsuit will spur our prisons into action, putting in place basic protections recommended by public health authorities. These are all the facts that I think about and discuss openly, and I'm determined to speak up because I know that people who look like me will listen. But when I have quiet moments to myself, how I feel is much harder to explain. In those moments, I have the broken heart of a mother who can't protect her child. When I lie down at night, the fear that keeps me awake doesn't care how I dress or what color my skin is. It's the fear of being a broken mother with a broken child in a broken system. Fear for his health and safety, but mostly fear for the future. And knowing that I'm not alone in that fear is little comfort, because it means that there are countless other mothers afraid for what's ahead for our sons and daughters if we don't find a way to bring about change.
I've been litigating prison conditions cases for years. Prisons in Mississippi compared to prisons in other parts of America, by every objective measure, are extraordinarily dangerous and deadly places. I've worked with organizations and families in Mississippi to try and raise awareness about Mississippi prisons and push the Department of Justice to investigate. At the end of last year, the looming crisis came to a head. There was an uprising. It was violent. It was fueled by systemic sort of deprivations, lack of food, lack of medical care, lack of basic safety and staffing. Many people died and were maimed. In February, the Department of Justice finally launched an investigation, and then coronavirus hit. So before the pandemic, Mississippi prisons were a breeding ground for the types of medical ailments that make people vulnerable to rapid disease progression and death due to coronavirus. Mississippi Center for Justice launched and led an investigation into coronavirus prevention practices system-wide. We found that particularly at its two largest prisons in Rankin and Greene counties, which hold 6,000 people total, there was a shocking lack of mitigation measures being taken. People inside don't have soap. They don't have enough, they can't wash their hands regularly. They don't have a way to dry their hands. They don't have enough chemicals to clean with. There's no disinfection every day in common areas or living areas. When they do have enough chemicals, they're ripping up sheets, their bed sheets, to try to wipe surfaces down, or they're using their personal bathing towels, which are unlaundered. They'll try to hand wash them, or they're using their own t-shirts. We also found that there are people that are actively reporting symptoms of coronavirus and they are not being tested or isolated. In fact, system-wide, MGOC holds over 18,000 individuals in custody, and they have only tested a couple dozen. So in May of this year, along with our partners, we filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Mississippi Department of Corrections and the heads of the two largest prisons. We said that they are violating the rights of people who live inside there who have disabilities under federal disability law, and also under the Constitution, under the 8th Amendment. So along with our partners at MacArthur Center for Justice, Hogan Lowe Law Firms, ACLU, and disability rights attorney Mark Whitburn in Texas, we also filed about 2 weeks ago emergency motion for relief in this case. We hope to have an update for you soon.
You know, the Mississippi Center for Justice helps a lot of people. Many people who just do not have the resources to afford good legal services. Thank you, Mississippi Center for Justice. So hard, I couldn't get up. Friend came out and licked me a hand. Now I'm on my feet, now I can't stand. Am I my brother's keeper? Oh, yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Oh, yes I am. I am, I am, I am. This thing together, and that's a fact. Gotta keep moving and don't look back. Race ain't given to the swift nor the strong, but to those who keep marching on. Am I my brother's keeper? Oh yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Oh yes I am. I am, I am, I am. Oh yes I am. I am, I am, I am. Oh yes I am. We need each other. You know that is true. Working together, there ain't nothing we can't do. We can move mountains. We can hold back the sea. I'm gonna help you. Now will you help me? Am I my brother's keeper? Oh yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes I am. Am I my brother's keeper? Oh yes I am. I am, I am, I am. Oh yes I am. We gotta keep taking care of each other, y'all.
I agreed to become president and CEO in January because I felt called. The country is now at a crossroad. We can choose the right direction. We can choose equity. We can choose to be the difference that we want to see. We can choose to be change agents, just like tonight's honoree, Donald B. Verrilli, Jr.
Thank you to the Mississippi Center for Justice for the great work you do in the state of Mississippi, for honoring my friend Don Verrilli in this first ever virtual Mississippi on the Potomac event, and for asking me to say a few words to introduce him this evening. I will say, for starters, that I know how much Don cares about the Center's causes and its goals of creating a just society and healthy communities across the state of Mississippi. A just society and healthy communities are the right goals for Mississippi and for the entire United States of America, and they're goals that Don has devoted so much of himself to over his remarkable legal career. I am very fortunate to have been close friends with Don and with Gail for 35 years. I really didn't believe it, but I did the math, and 35 years it is. Don and I worked closely together as young lawyers and then as young partners in private practice. We worked together in President Obama's Department of Justice. We worked together as volunteer lawyers on several Democratic presidential campaigns. And throughout it all, we talked about baseball and law and politics, our families, our careers, our travails and our aspirations. And in recent years, from time to time, we've done it over in Manhattan. Don recently said of his mentor, Justice Brennan, "Great justice, even better human being." And Don is a great lawyer and an even better human being. And one could even say that in Don, these qualities are mutually reinforcing. His humanity imbues his lawyering, and vice versa, I think, to the great benefit of both. On the lawyer first. He's argued more than 50 cases in the United States Supreme Court, including his successful defense of the Affordable Care Act, his successful advocacy for marriage equality, his vindication of humane immigration policies, establishment of a meaningful right to effective assistance of counsel in capital cases, preserving the principle of disparate impact in Fair Housing Act litigation, and critical advocacy in many cases involving civil rights, women's rights, the First Amendment, and on and on. Now, he said he learned from Justice Brennan all those years ago, quote, about law, about integrity, and to be inspired by our Constitution, which shows us what we need to aim to try to achieve. Now, on integrity, carried from Justice Brennan's chambers all those years ago throughout his career, Don has described his job as Deputy White House Counsel in this way, as representing, quote, the presidency, not the personal interests of the president. and as, quote, standing up against political pressure from people who aren't lawyers and don't always appreciate the niceties of the law, close quote. Now that delicate turn of phrase is lovely, but the point is this. Anyone who knows Don knows that in every setting, he will fight to find the right way to do the right thing and make sure it gets done when he does. But that he will certainly stand up against anyone, however powerful, wanting to do the wrong thing or even the right thing for the wrong reasons or in the wrong way. And finally, to close, some qualities of the human being. Self-deprecating humility and good humor, genuine passion and great personal warmth, enormous generosity and personal loyalty. Of course, over 35 years of thick and thin, you find out who your friends are, which is no small thing. So herewith, I give you my friend, Don Verrilli, who has devoted so much of himself to making our country and this state more just and more healthy. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being a part of this. It's really wonderful to be recognized by the Mississippi Center for Justice, especially this year of all years, and on Juneteenth of all days. But you know, being in the spotlight, even a virtual spotlight like this, makes me a little uncomfortable. And that's because I've come to appreciate some things over the years. The first thing I understand is what a role good fortune has played in my life. I've had the chance to argue some great cases, but that's not because I was better or more deserving or that I earned it. I just happened to be there when the work needed to get done, and I was lucky to get the chance to do that work. The second thing I've come to understand is how minor my own contributions have been in the great scheme of things. My contributions have been one small step in a long struggle carried on by others who really made all the difference. Sure, I got to stand up and argue in defense of the Affordable Care Act, but that was only because of the extraordinary effort by so many people to get the Affordable Care Act enacted into law. Not to mention the decades and decades of struggle to have access to health care recognized as a basic right in this country. And sure, I got to stand up and argue for marriage equality. But again, that was only because of decades and decades of courageous, ceaseless struggle for equality by so many others. And the third thing I've come to appreciate is that anything I've accomplished because of the people that I've had the privilege to work with in my career. Brilliant, dedicated lawyers who have always made me much better than I could ever be on my own. So what all of that tells me is that at a moment like this, the only appropriate emotion is gratitude. So let me express some gratitude. And let me start with David Ogden, my good friend, as he mentioned, for 35 years. David, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And more importantly, thank you for the immeasurable benefit of your friendship and support, which has been an incredible gift. To my other colleagues and friends who have contributed to this evening's event, your words mean so much to me. Thank you. To my wife, Gail, who, as many of you know, spearheaded the effort to make tonight's event a success. You know how deeply, deeply I appreciate everything you do. And I want to thank every single one of you participating in this event tonight for stepping up and showing your support for the Mississippi Center for Justice. It could not be more important. I know all of you are besieged with requests for contributions from many worthy organizations, now more than ever. But the support you are providing to MCJ makes a huge, huge difference. For all of the financial strain that our law firms and businesses and families may be feeling right now, the people who MCJ serves are feeling that 1,000-fold. And most importantly, to the MCJ community, I want to thank you for allowing me to share in your mission. You inspire me every day. Your work to free Curtis Flowers from decades of unjustified incarceration, your work to secure voting equality for people of color in Mississippi, your work to protect our immigrant brothers and sisters when ICE descends on their workplaces or their homes, your work to protect our incarcerated brothers and sisters from the ravages of COVID-19, and so much more. The only reason this work is being done in Mississippi and done so well is because of your commitment, your dedication, and your brilliance. I was going to say that MCJ's work really meets the moment, but that's not right. MCJ has been committed to racial equality and to dignity and equality for the poor in Mississippi since its inception. So maybe what's happening is that the rest of the country is catching up to MCJ. I certainly hope so. Again, thank you very much, and happy Juneteenth.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be able to join you this evening to honor my good friend and colleague, Don Verrilli. Congratulations, Don, on this outstanding award. You know, if those of us who love the law could go back in time and ask our younger selves, why do you want to be a lawyer? We'd look up and we'd have different answers. Some of us might mention debate club. The older of us might even mention Perry Mason. But we'd look at ourselves and bright-eyed with a little bit of naivete, we'd say, I want to help people. I want to change the world. And we go off with that mission in mind. But of course, life comes upon all of us. The demands of the billable hour in business development can overtake us. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to go into public service, we strive to go back to that original goal. Few of us attain it to the level and degree that Don Verrilli has done. Every day, he has held the Constitution in his hand and made real the promise of America for so many who've been denied for so long. Every time that Don Verrilli went before the highest court of this land, he lifted his voice on behalf of the people of this country, people who sought redress from harm, people who sought to right a wrong, and people who sought, above all else, the promise of the Constitution, equality, nothing more, nothing less, no matter where you're from, what you look like, where you live, or whom you love. Don held their hopes, their dreams, their crusade in his hands, and he never let them or us down. Don Verrilli, master wordsmith, Supreme Court whisperer, advisor to attorneys general and to the president, congratulations on this well-deserved award. You've helped people. You have changed the world. Congratulations, my friend.
Don, I am so delighted that you're receiving this important award from the Mississippi Center for Justice on Juneteenth. It was such an honor to serve with you in the Obama administration, first when you were in the White House counsel's office, and then as the Solicitor General for the United States. You are the consummate public servant. Hardworking, dedicated, honest and true, and just a decent and kind human being. I'm so proud to call you my friend. Congratulations.
Hello, everyone. I am so thankful for this opportunity to support an organization, the Mississippi Center for Justice, that is near and dear to my heart, and for this opportunity to honor Don, who is my heart. The work of MCJ, helping to provide some measure of racial and economic justice, is needed now more than ever. This annual event, where we hear firsthand of the struggles and successes of the MCJ community, never fails to fill our hearts with respect for the community and what you've accomplished and what still needs to be done. And speaking of hearts, in addition to his legal brilliance and accomplishments, for those of us who know Don well, we know that what is in his heart and in his deeply held core beliefs make him the most deserving of this award and his blessings. Congratulations, Don. We love you.
Good evening. My name is Walter Boone, and I am the chairman of the board of directors of the Mississippi Center for Justice. We'd like to thank you all for attending our first virtual event on the Potomac. It is my honor and privilege to thank some folks, especially and in particular. First of all, to our own Don Verrilli. Don, we are grateful, and I join the distinguished speakers and Vangela in expressing our gratitude to you for your service to our country, to the Obama administration, and more recently, to the Mississippi Center for Justice as a board member, benefactor, and friend. Don, we thank you, and we thank you for allowing us to honor you tonight. To the firms of Latham and Watkins, Nikki Buffa in particular, and the Manat firm, June DeHart, we thank you for your work on the Emmett Till Historic Preservation Project. There are many in Mississippi who do not understand the reason why we need to protect and defend and preserve Emmett Till's legacy. The recent murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, to name three, reveal in stark contrast why Emmett Till's legacy is now perhaps more important than ever. Your work will ensure that Emmett Till's sacrifice will be permanently imprinted on the landscape of Mississippi for generations to come, and for that we thank you. To our host committee, thank you for helping us with your tireless efforts to put on this first virtual event and make it a success. To our sponsors listed in the program and elsewhere, we could not put on this event or do our work without you. Without you, Tony Augustin would likely still be in detention. Curtis Flowers would not be with his family on bail. And all of those that MCJ serves would be without this powerful voice. We thank you for your support, especially in this challenging economic time. To our board of directors, we are inspired by your willingness to give of your time, treasure, and talent, and we thank you for that. To MCJ staff and lawyers, there is perhaps no greater calling than doing what you are doing, which is serving your fellow Mississippians. We are grateful for all that you do. In fact, all of this is about you and the critical work that you are doing. We thank you. To Vangela, we thank you as well. When you agreed graciously to move from the chairwoman of the board position to the president and CEO back in January, you knew and we knew that there would be daunting challenges ahead. However, in hindsight, we had no idea of the scope of what those challenges would be. The pandemic and its devastating impact on the world, the country, Mississippi, and particularly the communities of color, the economic devastation which followed and hardest hit those that we serve, and more recently, our national outrage and introspection regarding race in the United States and in Mississippi have demonstrated in stark relief the amount of work to be done. We are grateful for your firm hand on the wheel and your clear vision of where we need to go. So thank you all for attending this evening. And for those of you who are joining and learning about MCJ for the first time, or those that are recently inspired by what we have shown today, we need your help. Please go to our website, www.mscenterforjustice.org, and find out how you can donate, volunteer, and help us in this fight. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don and Walter, for your words of support and for all that you do for MCJ. As I said before, we fight on so many fronts, and that fight continues every day. Right now, we are as close as we have ever been to removing that romanticized emblem of a lost cause, the stars and bars from the Mississippi state flag. And across the South, Confederate monuments are being removed. Please enjoy this short film from Mississippi filmmaker Philip Scarborough, Dear Johnny Reb.
Hey, Johnny. I've got a letter here for you. I think you might like. Dear Johnny, I have excellent news. On April 9th, 1865, General Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in Appomattox, Virginia. War's over, Johnny. You can go home.
Now, with all due haste, stand down and spread the word among the other soldiers. Your tour is over. It's time to go home.
You see, though you valiantly did your duty and defended the homeland from the northern aggressors,
you've been deceived by a small minority who's tricked you into fighting for a lost cause.
A lost cause on the wrong side of history. And while you continue to stand, you cause others to believe in this lost cause, to keep fighting
And fighting and fighting. While you have stood there.
There has been bloodshed, hardship, misery, and unjust treatment towards your fellow countrymen.
And you have stood there, generation after generation, witnessing these atrocities. Atrocities that you have defended, Johnny.
You defended humans, slavery, and state-sponsored repression.
And the cotton-picking, antebellum way of life.
Not to mention Democrat redeeming, Mississippi planning,
failed Reconstruction, and state-sponsored repression.
You upheld brutality, terrorism,
threats, and beatings.
You justified harassment,
assassinations, cross burnings,
night riders, lynchings, thousands of lynchings.
You encouraged the Sovereignty Commission and the Citizens Council of America.
fear, ignorance, inequality,
voter intimidation and fraud.
You opposed sit-ins,
readings, waiting,
kneel-ins, squat-in, pray-ins, freedom houses, freedom votes,
Freedom schools, freedom riders,
freedom days, freedom summers.
You massacred Emmett, gunned down Medgar.
You swapped the bodies of Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney.
you perpetuated economic reprisal,
Jim Crow, convicted labor,
Taxation without representation and the psychological effects thereof.
of white supremacy and social engineering,
and forced dependency, low standards, and docility.
And Johnny, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So, not to put too fine a point on it, Johnny.
But, Johnny, this is what I think of when I see you.
You've become a reminder, an idea, a symbol, and it's a long past time for you to go.
So I stand here now, Johnny, to inform you
that you are relieved of your duty. Your amnesty is over.
Eres un traidor, no eres americano y no estás perdonado.
Johnny, all of this has become your heritage.
Now, go
home.
thank you everyone who joined us this evening. I hope tonight's program has shown you where MCJ has been and, more importantly, where we're going. The fight continues. We are still advocating for the end of systemic racism and injustice in economic systems, housing, public benefits, health care, and our criminal justice system. In order to continue this fight, we are asking for your support. You can make a contribution to our work and our mission by logging on to MississippiCenterForJustice.org. Any amount you can donate would be greatly appreciated. All power and freedom must be fought for, and that's what we do at MCJ. We fight. That's what we do at MCJ. We fight for justice. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad you're still with us. Right now, I'd like to perform another original composition. Well, you know, Mississippi has a long history of civil rights activism. Yeah, there was a lot of things to fight for in the past, and there are a lot of things to fight for now. So let me share this with you. Mississippi is the right place. Yes, it is, y'all. state, M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. Yes, y'all. Now, if you feel that you've been discriminated against, you better call the Mississippi Center for Justice.